Okay, so welcome everyone to the Health and Safety webinar. I'm Ange Williams from Oshbox. I'm just wondering, did any of you jump on the Health and Safety seminar that we ran through lockdown?
Yeah. Oh, I saw the recording. Not the...
Yeah. Okay, cool. So I think the last time that I ran a seminar on health and safety for Hawke's Bay tourism was 2015 when the Act changed. So it's been a few years, but what they've asked me to do is come along and just talk you through sort of who's responsible for what when it comes to health and safety, but also in terms of your organisations, what are sort of the top 5 things that I would say is important for you to be thinking about and making sure that you are keeping on top of it. So if we can just maybe just give me a little rundown on what your organisations are.
Okay, Raymond Jenkins from Cobden Garden, a bed and breakfast, and it's quite difficult separating the business from it being your home, so we really did that.
Okay, cool, yep. Norm?
Rafting and school trips and, teaching safety, basically.
Perfect. Oh, Ange, you're muted.
I'm good now, I'm with you.
Hi,
Ange Tremaine from Mojo Journeys, and we are walking and trekking and retreating. So, a lot of outdoor activity as well as indoor.
Okay, cool. And Teddy?
Hi everybody, I'm Teddy. I'm a local tour guide. Just to do tours around the country as well in Hawke's Bay, especially in Spanish and French, but now I have to specialize in English.
Oh no, that's awesome. Thanks guys, that gives me a good idea. I mean, we really do have quite a range, right from sort of bed and breakfast through to rafting. So what I'll try to do is give you some examples that are actually specific to how you operate. Do you all have health and safety systems in place at the moment?
Yep.
Yep, okay, cool. So this is for you more of a chance just to make sure you're on the right page?
Yes.
Okay, cool, awesome. Okay, so under the Health and Safety at Work Act, there is 3 different levels of responsibility. At the top, you've got a person conducting a business. Oh, by the way, I forgot to tell you, I'll send you notes on everything I'm about to tell you. So I'm a bit old school in that I don't have PowerPoint presentations or anything like that, but what I will do is I will send you a list of all the sorts of things that I talk about today so that you don't have to worry about taking too many notes down. So at the top, you've got a person conducting a business or undertaking. So you'll hear a lot about a PCBU. In your cases, that will be the company rather than an actual person. And the PCBU really just needs to make sure that it has all the policies in place to ensure the safety of anyone to do with your organisation and the work that you do. Underneath that, you've got officers. Now, officers are people within your organisation that make decisions that significantly impact on everyone. So that would be like a company director and probably all of you. And you have personal liability to ensure that you are making sure that the decisions that you make are taking into consideration health and safety. And then underneath that, you've got workers, and workers covers anyone working for your organisation, regardless of whether they are an employee or a contractor or even someone who's volunteering on an ongoing basis to you. They're all deemed to be a worker. And so how this differs from the old Act is that prior to this, really there wasn't a lot of shared responsibility. It was all very much like people going, that's not my responsibility, that's your responsibility. Whereas what this new Act says is that by breaking it down into the 3 different levels, everyone is responsible, from the top right down to contractors and to workers. And what they also say is that if you've got one company working alongside another company, then you share responsibilities. So for example, Norm, with your rafting in your schools, there's shared responsibility between both you in terms of the work that you're doing, but also there's responsibility on the school as well, which I think is great. I think it's great that there is that shared responsibility, because it means then that everyone needs to work together on doing their part to control the risks that they control. So I guess the question is, well, what is it that you need to be doing then to fulfill your duties as a PCBU or as an officer? And this is what I call the high five. So it's the top 5 things that you need to make sure that you've got in place. The first thing is your policies and procedures. So you need to make sure that you have some form of documentation. It might be a health and safety manual that says, this is what we're going to do if we have an incident. This is what we're going to do in terms of identifying and managing the risks to do with the work that we do. If we take on staff, this is how we're going to induct them and train them. And if there's emergency situations, this is what we're going to do. So that basically sets out what your expectations are for anyone that has anything to do with your organisation, whether they're working for you, whether they're a customer, or whether they're another business that's working alongside you. So that sets out your expectations. The next 4 sections that I'm about to talk to you about are the things that you do and the documents that you use to prove that you're doing the things that it says in your manual or in your policies and procedures. Tell me, do you all have employees?
Yep.
Right. Okay, cool. So about half and half on that one. All right. I will touch on employees as we go along. I know it doesn't apply to everyone, but it's probably a good thing to know about anyway. So once you've got your policies and procedures, the next 4 sections are incidents, hazards, people, and emergencies. So the first thing is incidents. You need to make sure that you have an incident register and that you write down any near-miss injury or illness that occurs. And the most important thing about this is that you're documenting down what happened, what caused it, and what you are doing to prevent it from happening again. So there needs to be an actual action point. I would say if you have staff, then anyone can write down, what happened and what they think caused it. But when it gets to talking about what preventative actions you're going to take, that needs to be at a senior level, because otherwise the sorts of things I see is, I almost backed over someone, a kid with a truck, be more careful. Well, that's not enough. So we need to make sure that when an incident is recorded, you are really looking at what are the causes, what are the underlying causes behind it, and then what preventative actions can you take from that. So you need to document down every incident that happens, but then on top of that, you've got what's called notifiable events. And notifiable events are the death of anyone, a notifiable injury, which is anything that requires immediate admission into hospital, and a notifiable incident, which a lot of people don't know about this one. So a notifiable incident is where there is a near miss and there is an immediate risk to someone's safety. So, for example, we've got something collapses. Let's say that there's a malfunction to one of your rafts, Norm. And that means that luckily no one was hurt, but there was an immediate risk to someone's safety. That would actually be notifiable. So you would need to notify WorkSafe of that immediately, and then you have 48 hours to give them written notification of it. It's something that's reasonably not well known, and we have found that it's a bit of a grey area for WorkSafe as well, in terms of what is an immediate risk to someone. But I do say that if you notify them and they come back and say, oh no, it's fine, it's not notifiable, it's better to do that and get a gold star, for telling them, than to not tell them and then find that actually you should have. So that's incidents. I get asked quite a bit whether you should, write down plasters. I would be saying yes. I don't expect an entire essay because someone used a plaster. But what you're looking for, particularly if you have employees, is you're looking for things like trends. Is one person using 5 plasters a day, or do you have 3 staff who are all getting hurt in a minor way, but doing the same task or on the same piece of equipment, in which case you could probably make a quick change to that. So I would say that even minor incidents I would document down, but definitely anything above a plaster. And you may look at notifiable events too and think, oh, I can't really see that happening in my bed and breakfast. But we have actually seen this. So particularly around situations where you might have someone who has arrived at your accommodation, it's been raining, they slip on your tiles, they break their hip, they end up in hospital, notifiable event. So it can happen in all of these different situations that you have. What we need to make sure that you are aware of is what that definition is, so what that list of things is, and what you need to be recording. So in the notes that I send through to you, I'm going to send a bullet pointed list and a flow chart of, I should probably write down all the things I'm about to promise you, because I start getting very generous in these videos and handing out free stuff. So I'll put in here, I'm going to send you a flow chart that talks to you about what to do if there's minor incidents or what to do if it's notifiable, and I'll also send you the definition of notifiable events. Do you have any questions around incidents? Have you come across anything that you're not sure about?
That's been fine.
Okay, perfect. The next section, the third section, is hazard and risk management. So what you need to have is a hazard register that's basically a list of all the hazards to do with the work you do, the environments that you're in, the equipment that you're using. And then in that, you also need to have a list of all the controls that you have in place to try to eliminate or minimize the risk of those hazards hurting something, or sorry, someone. What I normally find is that it's best with a hazard register to break it down into sections, because you'll normally have your sort of general hazards, and then you'll have, maybe things that are specific to certain locations or to certain tasks. And with that hazard register, you need to do a risk assessment. Are you all familiar with the risk assessment at all?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, cool. It was really interesting when I first started doing seminars back, sort of 3-4 years ago. It was a very new concept here. Prior to that, all we had to do was ask ourselves, is it a significant hazard? And that sort of was very open to interpretation. So I think the risk assessment model is really good. I do get asked quite a bit when you're doing a risk assessment, when you do the initial risk, so working out how risky is it before you do anything. I get asked a lot about, sort of, well, again, that does kind of seem open to interpretation, because one person may say that, they feel that something's an extreme risk. Someone else might say that they feel like it's more of a moderate risk. What I can say, and what I've found in the conversations I've had with WorkSafe, is that they're less likely to be concerned around what risk rating you gave it. I mean, obviously, if it's an extreme risk and everyone can see it's an extreme risk, and you say it's a low risk, then we've got a problem. But they're not so worried about what you're doing there. What they're more concerned around is what your residual risk is. So in your hazard register, it should say how risky is something before you do anything, compared to how risky is it after you've put controls in place. So for example, you might have, what's a hazard? Slippery surfaces, let's say. Let's say you've got slippery surfaces and your entire office is tiled, and you get quite a bit of rain in the Hawke's Bay. I don't really know. According to your sign, that doesn't happen. So in terms of your hazard register, you would list out that slippery surfaces is the hazard, And you'd say, okay, so how risky is our slippery surfaces if we did nothing? How likely is it that someone's going to get injured? And if they did, how bad would it be? And you may decide that that starts off as a high risk. Then you say, okay, so what are we going to do about it then, seeing as it's a high risk? We're going to put mats down. We're going to have a slippery when wet sign. We're going to wear appropriate footwear. We might water blast down the entranceway when it starts getting moldy. I don't know. So those are your controls. So then what you do is now you say, okay, so how risky is it now that we've done all those things? What WorkSafe have said is that they're more interested in seeing how low you've managed to get it and that you have actually reduced that risk down, rather than whether or not you picked up that it was moderate or high to begin with. They want to see that your residual risk is lower than your initial risk, because if it's not, you're not doing enough in the middle. You don't have enough controls to try to bring that down. So this is what you really want to be showing in your hazard registers, is that you have identified these hazards, that you've done a risk assessment and that you've managed to get it as low as possible. The other thing that you'll be wanting to see too is that it's regularly reviewed. What I used to say to my clients is I used to say, okay, so every 6 months I want you to go through and review your entire hazard register. And what I realized was that no one ever did it, because what we found was that it was too big a job. And the other problem about saying something like that is that normally one poor person would end up being in charge of that hazard register, and they would know everything that there was on there, but not one other person in the organisation knew what was on there. So what we've changed to is actually suggesting to people that they review maybe 1 or 2 hazards from their hazard register at each of their team meetings. So some companies will have toolbox meetings, some people will have team meetings. If it's just you by yourself, you don't have to have a meeting by yourself. I could see a couple of you going, what? I have to have a meeting by myself? No, you don't have to have a meeting by yourself. But what you do have to prove is that on an ongoing and frequent basis, you are having conversations around health and safety. And quite often too, in these meetings, you run out of things to talk about when it comes to health and safety. Probably not you, Norm, because you're slightly higher risk and there's a lot of things that change. But in those toolbox meetings, health and safety meetings, team meetings, whatever you want to call them, what I quite often see is that, it's sort of, no, we've had no incidents, no one's concerned about anything, no, we haven't noticed any new hazards, and you'll sign a piece of paper to say that you had a meeting. If you instead concentrate on, sort of 1 or 2 hazards from your hazard register at each of those meetings, it's going to give you topics to talk about, or if you're there by yourself, things to think about. And it's going to mean that after you've done a year's worth of these meetings, which you have to have, you will have reviewed your entire hazard register. It'll also, it'll mean that you get the things done that you need to, so you get reminders as well. For example, you might have in your hazard register that lack of first aid equipment is a hazard. And so in your controls for that, you say that you regularly check your first aid kit. If you say that at some point in the next 12 months, that's going to pop up as one of your monthly things you need to be thinking about, then it means that once every 12 months, you're going to go and check your first aid kit and check things like your expiry dates. It'll also say things in there like you're going to have an adequate ratio of trained first aiders. So when that pops up in your hazard register, that's when you go, oh yeah, when was the last time that we did that? Have our certificates expired? Do we need to organise some training? Maybe it says your electrical leads in there, and your controls say that your electrical leads need to be tested and tagged. So at that point you think, oh, have we done that? Did we organise it? Do we need to maybe make sure that we get them done again? So I guess what I'm trying to say is that there's a number of different things that you have to do on an ongoing basis. As well as that, you also need to be reviewing your hazard register, and you need to prove that you're having ongoing conversations either by yourself in your head or with the people that you work with. And so by doing this, by reviewing 1 or 2 hazards a month, you'll be ticking the boxes to do all of those things. And it will also mean that you keep on top of keep on top of your to-do list when it comes to health and safety as well. Does that sort of make sense in terms of hazards and risks?
Yeah, I've just got a question that always confuses me. With the risk assessment,
Yeah.
is it the likelihood or the probability of something happening, or the dire consequence that makes it a high risk, or is it a combination of both? Because often I'm sitting here thinking, I mean, is this high risk because it's really likely to happen, or that somebody could potentially die from it?
It's definitely a combination of both, because in some cases, you could have that it's very unlikely that it's going to happen, but if it did happen, it could kill someone. That's still going to be an extreme risk, because the minute someone could die, it's an extreme risk, regardless of how likely it is that it's going to happen.
Okay, so I'm often considering things like tsunami, and I think, that's pretty serious when you're walking on the beach, but it's pretty unlikely. So
it is. However, what we also need to be looking at is what we can reasonably control. Right. So when it comes to thinking about what controls you need to have in place, it's about what would be deemed to be reasonable. So, for example, take company cars. I'm guessing as a tour guide, Teddy, that you'd have a vehicle that you're driving. What I get asked is, do I put down vehicles as an extreme risk because someone could crash into me at any time on the road? Well, no, I wouldn't necessarily say that, because what you're looking at is what can you reasonably control. You can't control what other people do, but what you're looking at is, do you have the correct license for the vehicle? Do you have the correct endorsements? Is it regularly serviced? Is it fit for purpose? Does it have its warrant of fitness and its rego? And do you have policies around making sure that you don't drive it when you're under the influence or on medication? Or have you thought about fatigue in terms of long journeys and taking breaks? And those are the sorts of things you can control. So in terms of a vehicle, you might say that, actually you drive a vehicle for long distances quite often. So you may say that it's quite a high risk for you. However, you say, well, all those things I just listed are all the controls that you're doing to try to minimize the risk of something happening. So therefore that vehicle then becomes a low risk, because if you're doing all of those things, it's now going to be pretty unlikely that it happens, because we're not taking into consideration the other people that are on the road. It's going to be pretty unlikely that's going to happen. And hopefully, if you've done all the right things and you're wearing your seatbelt and everything else, and hopefully it wouldn't be as bad as what it would have been had you have not done anything.
It's quite interesting, because in my case, I drive my own vehicle, but also if it's a big group, I would rent a car, or I will be guiding for somebody else, an agency, and they would rent the car and they would put all the insurances in places and things like that.
So what you can do is that you can put driving your own personal vehicle for work purposes as a hazard. It's the same as when you if you have employees and you are asking them to use their own vehicle to travel to see a client or to go to a training session or conference or something like that, the minute that they're using that vehicle, regardless of whether it's owned by the company or not, once it's being used for work purposes, it becomes a workplace. So it means then that you need to make sure that you've got those policies and procedures around. And I know, Rami, you were talking that there's really difficult to kind of compare home and personal with what is a business.
This has come up, because I'm very involved in the Bed and Breakfast Association, and it has come up, just, if you are going to the supermarket for the bed and breakfast, well, actually you're using it as a business. It does get whereas at the moment there's no guests, so we're just going for ourselves. It's very hard to distinguish.
Yeah. I mean, I always say to people, start with the things that can kill you and work your way back from there. In a bed and breakfast situation, you're fairly low risk, unlike old Norm, who's rafting all over the show. You are fairly low risk, so it means that the sorts of hazards that you're going to be looking at, you're not going to have huge numbers of controls in place to try to lower that even further. So I'd be saying that I'd say look around at what the hazards are within the environment that you're in and think, what could I reasonably control to make sure that no one gets injured? The thing is, you're probably doing all the things that you were going to do anyway, because even in your own house, you don't want people to get hurt. All this is it's you documenting down the fact that you're doing these things. So I would just, I would start with anything that you see as being high risk. And I mean, that might be if you have, if you've got a shed that's got chemicals in it for your garden spraying or something, that you have that, locked up if you've got kids staying. So you've got to sort of think about the entire environment, but as well as that, on top of that, it's the sort of things that you're doing: manual handling, cleaning,
lifting.
hazardous substances, cleaning products, those sorts of things. Yeah, great. Oh, I think you've all frozen. Can you see me all right?
Yep.
Oh, my internet connection is unstable, apparently.
We can still hear. We can still hear you. We can still hear you, Angie.
Oh, good. Oh, you're starting to pop back again now. Okay, good. So that's hazard and risk management. What I'll also do is I'll just send you, I'm going to send you a blank hazard register table, which is the template that we use when we're creating hazard registers for our clients, just to give you an idea of how we lay it out. And I'll also give you our risk assessment table, our risk matrix as well. So for you, Ange, when you're looking at the severity and the likelihood, it'll give you an idea of how we work out what those ratings are. And that's the table that WorkSafe uses. So there's a million different ones you see all over the place. Some people make it very complicated and they calculate different scores and things like this. Ours is very easy. It goes low, moderate, high, extreme. We like to keep it simple. The next section, I just need to check time-wise. The next section is people. So this will only apply to Norm and Ange, is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Did you say that you had employees, Ange?
I just people who contract to me, yeah.
Okay, cool. All right. So there's a difference between contractors and employees, and I'll talk you through what the difference is. Basically, anyone that's working for you, we need to make sure that they've all been inducted. So make sure that they have an induction form that goes through what to do if there's an emergency, what the hazards are, make sure they've got any personal protective equipment they should be given, where is the emergency equipment located, what do they do if there's an incident, what are the safe operating procedures for the work that they do. All of those sorts of things we want to include in that induction form, because it's all a conversation that you want to make sure that you're having with them. And then get them to sign off on it. So what you want is for them to sign to say that they have understood and will comply with all of the policies and procedures that you have in place. What we find is that for the clients that we've had that join us, who haven't had an induction form, can quite often be joining us because they've had problems with that, where someone will do something stupid, and I can guarantee that the first thing that they're going to say to WorkSafe is, I never knew I had to do that. No one told me. Now, if you have an induction form, then that's one of the ways that you can prove that you had actually gone through these policies and procedures with them. Now, with an employee, I would be doing this just once, because from that point on, there should be regular training and there should be, team meetings or toolbox meetings that you're having. With contractors, I'd be saying that this should be like an annual thing. So once a year you would go through and do an induction, purely for the fact that they may not be with you all the time like an employee would be. The other thing with contractors, Ange, is that we need to make sure that they have their own health and safety systems in place. So what we do is that we create what's called a contractor application form. And that gets emailed out to them and it says, right, okay, so we take safety seriously and we want to make sure that anyone that's doing work for us that's not an employee also takes safety seriously. And this would be the same remit for you if you had electricians or plumbers and that sort of thing that are coming into the bed and breakfast, that are contracting to do sort of work. You would send them a contract application form and that says to them, we want to see copies of your health and safety policy. We want to see copies of your insurance. We want to see a copy of your incident form. We want to see a copy of your hazard register that's specific to the hazards that you come across in the work that you do for us and what your controls are. You may say that you want some sort of verification that their team are trained. Once you've gone through this process and they've submitted documents to you, just double check them, because we see some interesting things that come through. So sometimes they might send you documents that were signed in 1997. Sometimes they will send you a blank hazard register that has nothing in it. Sometimes they may have paid a dodgy health and safety consultant that's given them a hazard register that has nothing to do with the work they're doing. For example, I audited an earth moving company recently, and not only had the $10,000 they'd spent for a health and safety system given them documents that had the wrong name, so that it had a different company name on it, and it had safe operating procedures for a kitchen cake mixer in it as well. So I would say just double check the documents that that your contractors are sending into you, because you want to make sure that they are doing the right thing. And then you can approve them to work for you for like 3 years if you want to. You know, it's not that you have to do it every single time they're going to come in. It's just more of a case of making sure that they do have the right things in place. In terms of employees, just going back to employees, I was just thinking, also just making sure that you have emergency contact details for them and medical information. So, you know, what allergies do they have? Are they on medication? Is there pre-existing medical conditions that you should know about? Those sorts of things. And what I hadn't been telling clients to do is to regularly check in with their employees about whether that information has changed. We've started doing that now, and quite a few of them have gone, oh, wow, like there might be, you know, their next of kin person is completely different now, or maybe they've been put on a new medication that they had no idea is actually not something they should be taking while they're driving, or possibly operating heavy machinery. So I'd be saying that that once a year, it would be probably a good idea just to give them that form out again and say, hey, look, can you just check those details and let me know if anything's changed in that? Do any of you have employees or contractors that are driving your vehicles?
Yep.
So Norm, have you heard of Driver Check?
We have to do police checks anyway, but yeah, we have to hold their licenses and all that sort of thing. Yeah. Okay,
cool. Because we had a client recently that wasn't aware of Driver Check. Just for the rest of you, Driver Check is a government website where you can put your employee's driver's license details into it, and if they lose their license for any reason, it automatically notifies you. And the reason why I've been saying that, particularly if you have a fleet of vehicles, is that we had a transport client who one of their drivers lost his license over the Christmas period for drink driving and didn't tell them. And because you may have a photocopy of their license sitting in their employee folder, you don't check it every time they drive. And he certainly wasn't going to tell them because he didn't want to lose his job. He actually wrote off the truck, and insurance wouldn't pay out because it wasn't being driven by a fully licensed driver. So it's all the things you learn when you're in health and safety. That these are all now my handy tips that I say, if you're not using Driver Check, it might be something that you want to look into. So that's pretty much it when it comes to employees and contractors. Make sure that contractors,
one of the things we've found out is that you want to sort out who's the lead operator if you've got a contractor and yourself. Some
Yeah.
contractors have a stricter SOP than we do.
Yeah.
So you've got to work out who's you're actually going to operate under.
Yeah, absolutely.
Save a bit of a conflict. Yeah.
And I think that's where I was first talking about that whole shared responsibility thing. You know, it's all about communicating and coordinating activities and working out who's going to be responsible for what. And, you know, in terms of even things like you, Ramo, if you're getting like an electrician that's coming in, you have to think about the fact that you might have guests there at the time. So you want to know, you know, is there going to be noise and dust and fumes? Are they getting up on ladders? Could they be dropping things on people? So even in a lower risk environment, you still want to be making sure that you're using contractors that take safety seriously.
And Ange, I mean, when does it become your responsibility? Because we do that. We ask to see their health and safety policy, and I mean, it's a piece of paper,
Yeah.
you know, and it's kind of like, what do we? You know, you need the electrician or you need the plumber. You know, what do you do about it? I mean, we sign them in and we get them to note what they see as, you know, tell them about our hazards and ask, you know, and they will say identify that they're working on a ladder, so that's a hazard for them. But, you know, to be honest, I haven't seen a comprehensive health and safety policy from any of, and we're using reliable companies here in Napier. You know, when does it, how do you deal with that?
I mean, it's a problem that literally every organisation that has contractors struggles with, is getting the documentation from them in the first place and then getting actual, like, good quality documentation. If you don't have that, if they haven't given it to you, or you sort of think, oh, it looks like it's not all there, you are taking on more risk, because if it turns out that that they injure themselves or you or one of your guests or an employee on your site, then WorkSafe would look at you and say, well, you put them there. How did you know? You know, how did you know that they had their health and safety in place? However, in saying that, again, it comes down to what we can all reasonably control. So if you had an electrician there, I'll give you a couple of scenarios. If you've got an electrician there and they cut the wrong wire, Ramo, are you an electrician? No, I thought I just better just check this before I use the example, first of all. Okay, so you're not an electrician. If that electrician cut the wrong wire and electrocuted himself, or you, that would be on the electrician, because that's something that they reasonably control. If they came in and they said to you, oh, we need to get up to the ceiling, can we use your ladder? And you said, yeah, no problem, use my ladder. And that ladder's been sitting there for a while and it hasn't really been well maintained. And it ends up, you know, that it snaps and they fall to the ground, that falls on you. So it all comes down to what you can reasonably control. When it comes to the documentation side of things, the first reason you're asking for that is because you want to know what are the hazards they're bringing on site that you need to be aware of. And like Norm said, what do their policies and procedures look like? Are they going to be, you know, are we going to fall under theirs rather than them falling under yours? But the second reason why you have it is so that if something happens and something goes wrong, you can prove that you were using a contractor who you believed had all their health and safety stuff in place. If they're giving you things you're not happy with, you need to go back to them, because otherwise you take on way too much risk. And the thing is, if you take an electrician or a plumber or any other tradie, they have to do this for every other business they go into. So they're not going to last very long if they don't have this stuff in place. They should be able to send it through to you pretty quickly. And if they don't, then you give them my details and I'll go and help them.
Most contractors will have their own associations and stuff that are certified and that sort of thing. So,
yeah,
you know, for me to send you guys my safety plan would be absolutely silly. So we just send people our certificate to say we've got it.
Perfect.
And
Perfect.
and you know, this, because it'd be totally superfluous for you to try and figure out what the hell we're talking about. And it's the same with an electrician or anybody else. And the other one that people get caught with is, you know, if you get a bus to come and bring your people up, then, you know, the country's rules dictate how they do that. So you would presume that a bus company will be doing it, especially a certified one or a well-known one.
I think you're absolutely right when it comes to different certifications or different pre-qualifications. So we see this a lot in construction now, where they have third-party pre-qualification services, and once you're, or actually with councils as well. So if you're a contractor that wants to work for a council, you now, once you're approved with the third party, you can work for any council. So they don't actually have to provide all that information to every single council. So you're right about the certificates and licenses. The only thing that I would be wanting to see is any hazards that I need to be aware of. So for example, in your case, you're working with schools. So schools would be saying to you, you know, we want to know what are the risks involved and what we're going to be doing and what are you doing about it, so that they can then look at the students that they're sending on there and see whether any of them have medical conditions that mean that they probably shouldn't be doing it, or whether there's any sorts of hazards that they need to think about from their end as well. Yep. So it's all about that sharing of information. In the last section, because I realised that I've basically sat here and lectured you for like 45 minutes. Apologies. I get on a bit of a roll when it comes to health and safety. The last section is emergency management. So this is things like making sure that, you know, obviously think about things like tsunamis and fire and medical emergencies, you know, all your sort of standard things. But also what a lot of people I find do forget about too, they think, oh, I've got a first aid kit and I've got a fire extinguisher and I have an assembly point sign and you know, we've got all that sort of stuff in place, so we're all good when it comes to emergencies. But what I say is just think about all the different situations that you can find yourself in. So for example, you know, you might be in areas where there isn't much communication. You might be out of cell phone range. So you want to be thinking about communication in different situations. What do you do if you don't have any cell phone range? Raymond, you might find that you might be alone with guests, and so you need to be thinking about, you know, in terms of your own security. You know, you're essentially working alone. So I would say look at these different situations as well, not just, you know, fire or tsunami or that sort of thing, but personal security as well. For example, I didn't do very well of this myself, and we have a policy where we just go and visit all of our clients or people that want to see us, and I went out to a farmer's place out in the backwops of the Waikato. I didn't tell my team where I was going. I didn't have it in my Outlook calendar. And I got there and there was no cell phone reception, and I decided that I was still going to go and meet with this guy in his house, and when I got in his house he locked the door behind me. I'm lucky that it turns out it was just a door that blows in the wind, and that's why he was doing that. But what it did make me think was, you know what, actually, you know, I think, oh, there's driving in my industry, oh, there's driving vehicles and there's going on to, you know, people's workshops, and, you know, I've got to think about, you know, do I have a first aid kit in my ute and things like that. What I never thought about was working alone, and working alone in a situation where I had no communication had anything have happened. So I'd just be saying that in terms of your emergency procedures, when you're talking about trekking and when you're talking about, you know, tour guiding and, you know, obviously normally as an adventure activity, you'd be audited on your emergency procedures. But for things like you, Raymer, as well, you know, thinking about, you know, having guests coming into your house or onto your property that you're not aware of and you may be there by yourself, it might be something to think about. And I don't want to leave this seminar on a dippy downer. So I will just recap what I've just talked about, and that's that there are those 3 levels of responsibility. So I'm going to send those through. We do have the high 5, which I'll also send you, which is your policies and procedures, incidents, hazards, people, and emergency procedures. And so far, the things that I have offered to give you for free is I'm going to give you a summary of everything that I just talked about. I'm going to give you an incident flow chart on what to do if something's minor or what to do if it's notifiable. I'm also going to give you a definition of what notifiable events are. And I'm also going to give you a hazard register template so that you can see how we lay it out and our risk rating matrix table. Is there anything else that I can help you guys with? Do you have questions? Would you like more free stuff?
Just a word to the others that we've come across, that if you are writing down or changing your hazards or doing something and you're telling people, get them to sign it.
Yeah.
I know it's a small thing, but it's pretty necessary to actually document that you've had a meeting or something now these days. And if you're somebody that's going to be busy and you have a accident and that sort of thing, have someone outside you can call in to look after it. It's pretty important because
I think so.
Yeah.
You have a good point there, Norm. What I haven't done is I haven't given you my contact details.
Yeah.
So I'll also make sure that, and I better write that down actually. Otherwise I'm just going to go, okay, good luck with that, guys. See you later. And then you'll go, where is she? Who was she? And the information that I send through, I'll make sure that you have my contact details so that, as Norm says, sometimes when things go bad, it's nice to know that you can call on someone and say, you know, what do I do? You know, what should I be doing in this situation? And that's something that I'm always happy to give free advice around if anything like that happens. Hopefully it doesn't, but.
Sorry, and the lady who does the trekking,
Ange?
Ange, are you up in the Kawekas and that area?
Oh, you're muted.
You're on
Ange.
mute.
Where do you trek, Ange?
Just very locally. So we're up and over the Cape at the moment, and yeah, just very locally. So in the Waipariki Valley. Yeah. So it's I guess the one thing that we did, I was wondering, was whether we need to get anybody in to check our health and safety in terms of being just getting advice, I suppose. I imagine you would need to, Norm, have had yours audited.
Yep, definitely.
Think it's something I need to look at or not?
You probably don't go into the activities, the extreme activities one, because you're not over the snow line, but
yeah, no, you'd be fine with that, and you wouldn't have to be audited by
I
WorkSafe.
kind of figured that, but yeah,
But I
we
think
did
it is a good
have
idea
one
to
incident.
Oh, sorry?
I did have an incident that wasn't that was notifiable. So I had a broken ankle, which was a big learning curve. So that was cool, though. It was sorted out.
I mean, if you want someone to sort of give you a bit of a review, I'd be happy to have a look at what you've got, because sometimes that's all it is. I mean, in Norm's situation, he has to get a full audit done by WorkSafe, which is not a fun time. But what I can do with you is that I can just give you a fresh set of eyes on it and see whether there's any other hazards or controls or documentation that I think that you could possibly be adding in or updating. We've got quite a few clients that do the same sort of work as you, so I can also look at it and give you an idea of whether there's anything that they're doing that might be helpful for you as well.
Amazing, thank you.
So if you want to just touch base with me, sometimes what you can do too is you can just email through to me what you've got and I can have a look at it.
Yeah, that would be easy.
Further to that, Ange, we've got a emergency radio that goes from Willow Flat right up to the top of the Kawekas, goes right out over Hastings. It's a monitored radio.
Okay.
So yeah, just have a look for the Kāweka, Google the Kāweka emergency radio.
Thanks,
might-
mate.
That's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah,
We
that's
definitely
awesome.
carry the personal locator beacon. I think we're just out of cell phone coverage a little bit, and that covers that.
Yeah,
But thank you.
brilliant. Okay, guys. Well, was there any last questions before I leave you all to your? Is it Monday today? Oh, yeah, no, it is Monday afternoon.
Thanks.
Just please don't
Well,
forget to
well,
give
for
us
us, it
your
doesn't feel too
contact
strange
details.
when you're in Auckland.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Not a problem, guys. All right. Well, you'll have my contact details if you want to get in touch with me anyway.
Thank you very much, Ange.
Okay, cool. See you later.
Thank you.
Bye.